Welcome everyone to the second lecture for Chapter 9, where we're covering the circulatory responses to exercise. Today we're going to be going over the electrical activity of the heart. And this builds upon the last lecture where we discussed the anatomy and the function of the heart. So let's dive into the electrical system. The electrical system of the heart has four main components. Right? The first one is the sinoatrial node, also known as the SA node. In short, we tend to call this the pacemaker of the heart. The second is the atrioventricular node, also known as the AV node. The third is the bundle branches. And finally, the fourth is the Purkinje fibers. So now that we've laid out the four different components of the electrical system of the heart, let's lay these out into where they're at in the associated anatomy of the heart. So let's do a quick review. As we know right here, this is the right atrium. This is our right ventricle. This is our left ventricle. Left atria. And this is our left ventricle, right? And so right here at the top of the right atria, we have the SA node. Here at the base of the right atria, actually let's go ahead and put these in some different colors so you know what's going on. Make this a little bit easier. I'm going to put these in red. Again, this is the SA node, also the pacemaker. Here we have the AV node. Here we have the bundle branches. And here we have the Purkinje fibers. Okay? Just to give you an idea of where everything's at. Now, the conduction of the heart can actually be broken down into four steps. The first step starts here at the SA node, and here in which the action potential is generated by the SA node and travels along the wall of the atria on both of the right and left sides, as we show here, right? And then as the electrical signal reaches the AV node right here, this gets us to the second step. From here, at the second step, the action potential passes through the AV node, through the AV bundle, and starts reaching down to the bundle branches, which gives us to our third step, right? And that action potential travels down the bundle through the septum of the heart and is starting to depolarize the left and right ventricles. And this then gives us to step 4, in which the action potential continues to go along the bundle of His throughout the entire septum of the heart, causing complete depolarization and contraction of the ventricles. Now, the reason we discuss this is because we can actually measure the electrical conduction of the heart. And we do this through a test called the electrocardiogram, also known as ECG and sometimes called EKG. Right? And so when we measure this, we actually get a complex wave, which looks a little bit like this. That's what we get, when we look at an ECG, and when we break it down, this particular portion is called the P wave. This segment right here is called the QRS complex. And this portion right here, this little hump, is called the T wave. And why is it important to know what the components of the electrocardiogram waves are? It's because it allows us to know what exactly is going on with the heart. And so let's actually show what we can see with what's going on with the heart. So for right now, let's go ahead and make a bigger PQRS electrocardiogram wave here. Okay. I'm over exaggerating this just for the sake of this lecture. And so here we have the P wave. Let's go ahead and divide this out right here. Next, here we have the QRS complex. Right? And then over here we have our T wave, right? Let's just call it T for short. So when we look at the wavelet as a whole, we can break it down to when the atria contracts and when the ventricles contract. Excuse me. So when we look at here in the first half, right here, the P wave, this portion right here is, we know that the atria is contracting. Atria contracts. Then here, beyond, going through the QRS, through the T wave, this is telling us that the ventricles are contracting. And how do we know this? Let's go ahead and break this down. So this can really kind of be broken down into 6 steps. So here at the first step, right, we'll start here at the SA node where depolarization begins to occur. So here for step 1, right, that's this portion, that's of the P wave where the SA node is beginning to depolarize. And as that's going on, we know that the whole atrial walls are depolarizing to allow for a contraction at this point, right? Per what we've discussed in the previous slides. And that brings us here into step 2, which is right here, this portion of the flat segment right beyond the P wave. And so what that tells us is that the atrial depolarization is complete, right? And so the atrial ventricles are completely contracted. And so what this does is then takes us to step 3, which is right here at the AV node, right? And ventricular depolarization is beginning. And that's this component of the QRS complex. And also simultaneously, as ventricular depolarization is occurring, atrial repolarization is occurring. The only reason we don't see that here in the electrical myogram is because it's overridden by the ventricular depolarization. And so this starts moving us here into step 4, where ventricular depolarization is completely occurring, right? Completely, that signal, that action potential is completely moved around the bundle and the Purkinje fibers, right? It's a little bit hard to see on that diagram, but that's this component right here. And then moving into step 5, we start getting repolarization of the ventricles. which we're going to substitute in green, right? And so basically, the heart is already completed its contraction. The ventricles have completely completed their contraction, and they're starting to repolarize to get ready for the next heartbeat. And finally, that moves us back in here into step 6. Oops. Let's go ahead and clear that out. Wrong color. Step 6 is where the entire ventricle is completely repolarized. And that's this section right here. So, again, step 1 is atrial depolarization, where the action potential begins at the SA node. Second is the complete atrial depolarization and contraction of the atria. Step 3 is the initial depolarization of the ventricles. Step 4 is the complete ventricular depolarization and contraction of the ventricles. 5 is you're starting to get ventricular repolarization and relaxation. And step 6 is the complete repolarization of the ventricles. So that's the 6 parts of the QRS, of the electrocardiogram wavelet complex and how it relates to the function of the heart. So I know this video went a little bit longer than planned, but hopefully this lays out exactly the conduction of the heart and how we measure it. And so to recap briefly, we covered 3 to 4 main areas. The first was the anatomy, the electrical conductivity anatomy of the heart. 2, we covered the electrical conductivity pathway of the heart. And 3, how we measure the electrical conductivity. And again, that's ECG. I hope this helps, and I'll see you on the next lecture. Take care.